The twin suns of Vorlath seared the arena in a relentless, white glare. Towering columns of black stone lined the colossal Colosseum, encircling a sea of roaring spectators that spanned a dozen species, each more fearsome than the last. The ground itself trembled as the announcement blared through the megastructures, vibrating the synthetic atmosphere. High Chancellor Karzul of the Jarvek Coalition stood at the apex of the dais, his obsidian armor etched with blood-red runes, his 4 crimson eyes scanning the throng. His voice, augmented by neural amplifiers, rolled over the assembly like a living force. By decree of the cycle of domination, our next conquest shall be... He paused, letting the moment stretch taut. Earth. A thunderous roar erupted from the stands. Guttural chants, clicking mandibles, vibrating quills. Every sound of anticipation filled the air as warriors slammed their fists, claws, and talons against the railings. Spectators tossed currencies and relics into floating betting rings, the air thick with the electricity of impending slaughter. The soldiers stepped forward, each a living weapon. There were the towering Vrogan, reptilian brutes with armored spines and fusion cannons mounted on their shoulders. The lithe Silvorians, their skin a translucent lattice of nerve light, twirled elongated plasma spears with casual grace. The Rulkor stomped forward, massive quadrupeds with reinforced bone plating and hydraulic augmentations along their limbs. They represented the pinnacle of engineered warfare, and each wore the gleaming combat harnesses of the Jarvek elite. Armor plates fused seamlessly with their musculature, embedded with transmitter nodes and micro-cameras that shimmered under the arena lights. Each suit was customized, jagged spikes, adaptive camouflage arrays, kinetic shields woven directly into their exoskeletons. The helmets were predatory, sleek visors and breathing ports exhaling mist like hunting beasts poised to strike. Atop each soldier's harness, a flickering hollow banner broadcast their unit insignia and vital signs, ready to feed the live streams across the known galaxy. Commander Varix, a hulking Silvorian with black-veined silver skin, adjusted the magnetic clamps on his gauntlets and smirked through the thin slits of his helmet. Beside him, Captain Dravak of the Vrogan Battalion flexed his claws against the ground, impatient, his armored tail slicing the air behind him in slow, dangerous arcs. Above the arena, a swarm of news drones buzzed, transmitting every preparation, every boast, every gleaming weapon to billions of eager watchers across the galaxy. Victory, Chancellor Karzul boomed, in less than 24 planetary rotations. Let Earth serve as a reminder. Resistance is extinction. The roar reached fever pitch. Betting houses spiraled their odds onto massive holographic displays, and the convoy of warships activated their hyperdrives. Streams of color twisted the darkness as the Jarvek fleets plunged into hyperspace, racing toward their prey. The blackness of space parted like a wound as the fleet tore out of hyperspace, Earth looming ahead, serene and unaware, or so they thought. Dropships disengaged and cascaded toward the surface like falling stars. Strategic points were targeted. The tundras of Siberia, the golden dunes of the Sahara, the choked jungles of the Amazon, and the crumbling skeletons of abandoned cities. Assault teams fanned out with military precision, descending through turbulent atmospheres in formation-perfect descents. Commander Varix's platoon hit the canopy first. The drop was smooth, too smooth. The Amazon's ancient trees shuddered from the impact, but no alarms blared, no civilians screamed, no defenses engaged. Varix activated his HUD, scanning for thermal signatures. The overlay blinked once, then showed a wide berth of absolutely nothing. His voice rasped through the comms. Scouts, forward positions. Sweep and report. 6 Silvorian scouts, blades sheathed in magnetic holsters, darted into the undergrowth, their adaptive armor bending light around them until they vanished into the forest. Minutes crawled by. The only sound, the rasp of the wind and the slow drip of moisture off the broad-leaved plants. Then static crackled. Scout 3! A choked gasp. Silence. Scout 5! Report! Varix barked. No response. His claws tapped the side of his helmet, resetting the frequency. "Scout leader, confirm status." Nothing. The live feed broadcasting across trillions of devices showed the commander's rigid stance as tension built. Spectators leaned forward across countless star systems, whispering, confused. The drones hovering above Varrix's position captured the moment the first blood splattered his visor. Not from an attack he saw coming. No, from a body dropping from above. One of his scouts, throat slashed so precisely that not even a sound had escaped. His armor's systems fizzled, HUD dead, neural enhancements offline. Varrix's instincts flared. He spun around, weapon raised, but the forest was silent. No movement, no heat signatures, nothing but the suffocating green. Elsewhere, on the white, endless expanse of the Siberian tundra, Captain Dravak's Vrogan contingent plowed through the snow, their exoskeletal servos whining with effort. The wind howled like a living thing, but there was no enemy in sight. No installations, no bunkers, no movement but the swirling snow. Their mission was simple: establish dominance by seizing a communications hub that intelligence indicated was nearby. Yet their path remained eerily clear. No defenses triggered, no human soldiers in sight. A low growl rumbled from Dravak's throat. His tail lashed once, then again. He motioned 2 shock troopers forward. They trudged through the snow, scanners active. Their armor, built to withstand plasma artillery, pulsed with shield energy. The first trooper vanished mid-stride. Not fell, vanished. One heartbeat he was there, the next, a gaping hole opened beneath his feet, and he was simply gone. No sound, no struggle. Dravak bellowed a warning. Too late. The second trooper triggered a ground sensor and activated a hidden gravity well. The snow exploded upward in a silent geyser, and the trooper's body crumpled as the atmospheric pressure around him collapsed. His reinforced chest plate folded like paper before the force. The camera feeds aboard orbiting Jarvek vessels flickered erratically as the event unfolded. Billions watched, jaws slack, as a force designed to sweep a planet evaporated before their eyes. In a shattered urban ruin, somewhere in the American Midwest, the Rule Corps detachment pressed into empty streets. Towering quadrupeds with reinforced armor and energy disruptors, they stalked past crumbling skyscrapers and rusted vehicles. Their heavy steps cracked the asphalt, sending echoes through empty buildings. Lieutenant Kroll, a Rule Corps Alpha, with deep-set orange eyes and battle scars across his plated brow, stomped ahead, scanning for heat or electromagnetic anomalies. Nothing. He raised a paw and signaled a spread formation. The unit split into smaller groups, fanning out across the ruins. A faint whir caught his attention. A drone. A scout. He turned, sensors sweeping, but the signal vanished as quickly as it appeared. Then, one by one, his squad's communications went dark. "Kroll to Delta 3, status," Static answered. "Kroll to Echo 1, report immediately." Silence. Panic gnawed at the edges of his mind. That shouldn't happen. Not here, not now. The feed from Kroll's chest camera trembled slightly. He was breathing harder, his instincts clawing at him. A dull thud echoed from a nearby alley. Kroll turned, raising his disruptor, and the building beside him folded inward, not from explosives, from the detonation of micropulsed charges placed with surgical precision into the structure's frame, designed to collapse outward and downward, trapping the Rule Corps units like insects in a jar. Dust choked the air, and the feed dissolved into gray static. At the edge of the galaxy, trillions of viewers leaned closer to their screens. Breath held. The clock on the transmission overlay blinked. 5 minutes since the invasion had begun. 3 elite units. Vanished. No visuals, no survivors, no bodies, just static. Just silence. The spectators leaned closer to their displays, trying to catch any fragment of what had happened. But there was nothing. No triumphant declarations, no battles to glorify, only an oppressive, suffocating silence hanging over the broadcast like a shroud. and somewhere, unseen and unheard, humanity waited. 10 days earlier, beyond Neptune's orbit, where the sun was no longer a warming light but a faint, forgotten ember, the Sentinel-9 array caught the first tremor. The station's monitors, blank for weeks, flared to life in an instant. A thin pulse, gravitational in nature, barely measurable. Then another, and another. Inside the cold, pressurized control chamber, Specialist Cole McKinley leaned over his console, brow furrowing. He tapped the command sequence to verify. No error. The readings were real. He keyed the secure line. Control to Phantom Grid Central. We have gravitational irregularities at Boundary Sector 18, requesting priority analysis. A beat of silence. Then a reply, sharp and clear. Data confirmed. Stand by. Across Earth's hidden infrastructures, gears that had long slept began to grind awake. At the heart of the underground fortress known only as Meridian, Commander Seamus Drury of the Strategic Planetary Command, SPC, stood motionless before the primary holotable. The three-dimensional map flickered into focus, a detailed projection of the outer system, overlaid with the incoming data streams. The pulses weren't random, they had rhythm, vectoring, propulsion signatures. A signature embedded within the distortion pattern registered, Jarvek class, undeniable. Drury jaw tightened. His hand hovered above the table before he pressed a single, ancient-looking button embedded beneath a glass panel. Throughout Meridian's labyrinth of corridors, crimson lights bled into the sterile halls. Alarms didn't sound. They weren't needed. Every operative knew what that light meant. Authorization codes were transmitted along encrypted black channels, activating protocols etched into the very bones of the installation. Begin SDC protocol, Drury ordered. The command didn't travel through public frequencies. It didn't exist on any civilian network. It shot straight into the veins of Earth's most clandestine systems. Across continents, abandoned mines stirred awake. Bunkers sealed beneath glacial mountains roared to life as kinetic locks disengaged and monolithic doors ground open. In the Kalahari Desert, what appeared to be a derelict satellite station shed its camouflaged skin, revealing a sleek, fortified silo beneath the sand. Everywhere, the message pulsed across frequencies tighter than any known encryption. SDC activation authorized. Jarvek scenario confirmed. At the Black Deep Station beneath the Pacific, Admiral Gustave Leclerc read the incoming confirmation with cold detachment. He didn't glance at the nervous communications officer beside him. His mind was already racing 3 moves ahead. Deploy zone containment forces, Leclerc commanded. Priority 1 coverage on all predicted vectors. The operative nodded and relayed the command down to logistics. Submerged armories, dormant for decades, flooded with power. Spider-legged transport drones rolled from holding cells, loading racks of hybrid weaponry, rail rifles integrated with salvaged Velcarin plasma cores, gravitic imploders, and frequency-modulating pulse grenades. None of this technology had ever been disclosed to civilian governments. There had never been a reason to reveal it, until now. In the Amazon basin, a shaft of mist swirled unnaturally as concealed access doors hidden beneath a 1,000-year-old grove split apart with mechanical precision. Personnel in adaptive gear, their bodies rippling with optical camo, emerged into the shadowed rainforest, carrying portable barrier nodes on their backs. Thousands of miles away, in the frozen reaches of Greenland, entire glaciers groaned and cracked open. Beneath, polished steel chambers glittered under artificial lights, humming with energy. Field Operative Grant Sawyer checked his exosuit calibration and linked to the command network. His team of 6, each marked only by serial ID tags, waited for his silent signal. One nod, no words. They vanished into the snow. Beneath the burning sands of Wadi Rum, in a cavern complex forgotten by modern maps, Commander Zane Iverson strode between rows of hardened soldiers prepping for deployment. Each man checked his weapon, his gear, his exit vector. No medals adorned their uniforms. No nationalities were stitched into their sleeves. They served Earth. No flags, no politics. Iverson paused beside an armored railgun emplacement and watched as the engineers finished calibrations. His adjutant, Sergeant Alina Matsuda, approached, tablet in hand. "Zone containment structures 1 through 9 are live," she reported. "Phase 2 defensive fields initializing now." Iverson gave a sharp nod. "Begin seeding nanodrone clouds. I want full atmospheric distortion coverage within 6 hours." "Already in progress, sir." He didn't thank her. There was no need. Efficiency was the only acknowledgement that mattered now. Deep within the Earth's command nexus, General Severin Boom stood alone before the master hologram, a three-dimensional lattice of Earth's strategic grid laid out before him. His uniform was immaculate, a dark, unadorned fabric designed for function, not ceremony. His hands were clasped behind his back, boots planted shoulder-width apart. The room was a cathedral of quiet focus. No shouted orders, no frantic scrambling. Each station operated with mechanical precision, officers moving with the certainty of those who had drilled for this exact moment 1,000 times over. The general's gaze swept across the glowing vectors, red lines arcing from deep space toward Earth's surface. He recognized the patterns immediately, where the Jarvek would aim their initial strikes, where they would seek beachheads, where they would overreach. It was almost insulting how predictable they were. Boom leaned forward slightly, fingers tapping a coded sequence into the table's edge. The ground-level feeds shifted, now showing subterranean deployment corridors opening, containment grids aligning with topographical choke points, gravitic dampeners preloading for precision denial fields. They were not preparing to defend Earth. They were preparing to capture the invaders. Boom's voice, a low growl of certainty, filled the command chamber without needing to be raised. The stage is set. Now we wait for the actors. Outside the fortified walls of humanity's hidden war machine, the world spun on, oblivious. Children went to school, traders argued in bustling markets, workers climbed scaffolds and returned home for dinner. The surface of Earth remained untouched by the unfolding reality beneath it. No government would issue warnings. No evacuation orders would be given. Because humanity, the real humanity, understood something the galaxy did not. When predators came hunting, sometimes the prey built traps, and sometimes those traps were made of flesh, steel, and ice-cold patience. 10 days, 10 breaths before the first footfall. The hunters were already walking into a cage so perfectly built, they would never even realize they were trapped. Present day. Back on Earth, Varric stalked forward across the gnarled undergrowth, boots sinking slightly into the soft mud. His plasma carbine swept the shadows ahead, its barrel tracking invisible enemies. Around him, his squad fanned out in disciplined formation, the bright glyphs of the Jarvek emblazoned on their armor, pulsing faintly against the murky light filtering through the jungle canopy. The mission was clear. Sweep the sector, eliminate any resistance, establish forward dominance within 2 hours. That was the expectation of the coalition. That was the promise the cameras beaming live across the galaxy demanded. Instead, the sector lay eerily dormant. No shots, no resistance. Only the steady hum of insects and the creak of ancient trees shifting in the wind. Varric paused, glancing at his tactical display. Static crackled across the HUD, the map flickering, resetting, distorting terrain features into unreadable glitches. He tapped a control node on his gauntlet. No effect. Behind him, Scoutmaster Relcor spoke, his serpentine voice edged with unease. System interference. Atmospheric distortion, perhaps. Adjusting frequency spread. Varric nodded once, his gaze never lifting from the dense foliage ahead. Continue advance. No delays. The patrol pressed onward, unaware of the shapes gliding silently above them in the higher canopy, bodies cloaked in adaptive stealth fields that bent the very fabric of light. In the high-altitude deserts of Gobi Sector, Commander Dravak's Vrogan forces thundered through the barren landscape. Dust plumed around them in thick clouds, masking their movements from any primitive optics, or so they thought. Dozens of hulking figures clad in radiant black armor stomped across the dunes. Their energy projectors scanned the sand with brutal pulses. Drones buzzed overhead, sweeping for biological or mechanical signatures. Nothing registered. "Surface scans negative," reported Lieutenant Groth, a smaller but vicious-looking Vrogan with mottled blue scales. "Possible underground fortifications," Dravak grunted, annoyed. "Surface wipe protocols. Begin now." 2 demolitions teams moved forward, deploying seismic charges along the suspected routes. They fell back into a secure perimeter. Dravak's gauntleted fist punched the activation code. The sand erupted upward, but not from the humans. The moment the seismic wave expanded outward, dormant devices buried deep responded with precision. Implosive charges detonated in perfect sync along pre-laid channels, creating sinkholes that swallowed half of Dravak's forward units in seconds. Their armor, designed to withstand battlefield impacts, was useless against the sudden vacuum of shifting ground. Groth scrambled back, cursing in his native tongue. "Ambush! No visuals!" barked Sergeant Jar, swiveling wildly. "No targets!" Dravak's visor filled with flickering static as more communications collapsed into silence. He roared into the channel. "Re-establish formations! Regroup at Point Theta!" But already, the field around them was warping. Optical distortions danced at the edges of their vision, like ghosts teasing the periphery of sanity. Far to the west, in the crumbling ruins of an abandoned metropolis, Colonel Koresh of the Rule Corps Infantry growled low as his troops marched through the skeletal remains of human civilization. The Rule Corps were creatures of sheer intimidation, thick, rhino-skinned giants augmented by biomechanical plates that covered their spines and arms. Their heavy plasma hurlers dangled at their sides, ready to vaporize any resistance. Their mission, symbolic domination. Occupy the ruins, raise the Javek standard, broadcast the submission of Earth. Yet the city offered no civilians to subjugate, no resistance fighters to crush, only empty towers looming like hollowed bones against the blood-red dusk. Koresh slammed his clawed fist against the side of a broken hovercar, sending it spinning across the cracked asphalt. "Where are they?" he snarled to his second-in-command, Captain Threx. Threx, smaller and sleeker, his armor covered in fresh kill tallies from past campaigns, shook his head. No life signs, no infrastructure sabotage, just emptiness. Koresh's black eyes narrowed. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing on the edge of a trap. On board the flagship orbiting above, Grand Marshal Vorik watched the data feeds with growing frustration. The video streams were disjointed, squads wandering deserted jungles, soldiers mired in sand, battalions pacing abandoned cities. No enemy engagements, no heroes, no glory. Billions watched the spectacle, first with confusion, then with boredom, and finally with a gnawing sense of something far worse. Vorik slammed his armored hand onto the holo console. "Tactical feed! Full analysis!" His orders rippled down to Sub-Commander Jevak, an avian-like alien with silvery plumage and a cruel beak. Jevak tapped furiously at the data nodes. "Attempting to compile field reports now, Grand Marshal," Jevak rasped. "Preliminary patterns suggest..." The feed cut out, then blinked back, distorted, then died entirely. Across the screens, a single glyph appeared for a fraction of a second, an unregistered encryption mark that none of the Javek systems could translate. The silence inside the command deck grew heavy. Vorik's mandibles twitched. "Explain." Jevak's wings shuddered. "External interference. Environmental, possibly. But..." His voice faltered. "It feels... directed." In the Amazonian mist, Varex's squad encountered the first undeniable proof they were not alone. Private Lorzan, a Silvorian scout, had strayed 10 meters from the unit's center line when he simply vanished. No scream, no struggle. Varex turned sharply, scanning the trees. The squad formed a circle, rifles aimed outward, breathing heavy, tense. Movement flickered at the edge of perception. Varix pivoted, finger tightening on the trigger, but saw only empty foliage. Then another soldier dropped, struck by an unseen force that sliced through his armor like it was paper. No plasma discharge, no projectile trace. Just a blur, and then nothing. The squad opened fire blindly, plasma bolts tearing the jungle apart. For every 10 shots fired, there was not a single target struck. Above them, unseen, the operators moved with spectral grace. Their camouflaged suits rippled against the environment, rendering them invisible but for the faintest distortions where air and light bent unnaturally. They waited for precise opportunities, a shoulder exposed, a helmet unclasped, then struck with silent, lethal precision before disappearing once more into the undergrowth. Within minutes, half of Varix's squad lay dead or incapacitated. He knew then. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't interference. They were being hunted. Furious, back on orbit, Grand Marshal Vorik ordered immediate reinforcement deployments. "Send reinforcement Group Delta to the urban ruins," he barked. "I want those sectors occupied and neutralized within the hour." Command officers rushed to obey. Drop pods ignited across the decks of auxiliary ships and launched toward Earth's surface, targeting the abandoned city Koresh's forces had entered. In the ruins, Koresh received the uplink of incoming reinforcements with grim satisfaction. "Finally," he growled, "we'll bring them into the open." The drop pods whistled down like falling comets. The first impact zone erupted in flames, not from a fight, but from pre-laid plasma mines hidden beneath the cracked streets. Each pod that touched down ignited a chain of explosions precisely timed to maximize chaos. Out of 50 pods, only 12 survived the landing intact. The survivors staggered out, disoriented and battered. The city responded. Walls shifted. Streets buckled. Autonomous drones, buried beneath debris and programmed to activate by specific mass and temperature patterns, swarmed from hidden alcoves. They were not built for intimidation. They were built for annihilation. The reinforcements disappeared into the mist and rubble without firing a single coordinated shot. Their last transmissions were garbled fragments, screams cut off mid-word, data feeds that ended in bursts of white static. In orbit, Vorik gritted his teeth, his mandibles vibrating with rage. "This is impossible," he hissed. No, it wasn't impossible. It was something far worse. The humans had been waiting for them. The planet wasn't defending itself. The planet had been designed to kill them. Beneath the shattered surface of the Amazon containment zone, Operator Owen Villar moved like a phantom. His silhouette barely disturbed the shimmering air, his body wrapped in a cloak that bent and refracted light into invisibility. Around him, a small team of 5 advanced through the subterranean access tunnels, a labyrinth of maintenance corridors, emergency shafts, and forgotten infrastructure linked seamlessly to the battlefield above. The air smelled of steel and damp earth, broken only by the faint ozone bite of their active gear. Each operative wore a full-spectrum stealth rig, powered by miniature gravitic regulators that masked their mass signatures. On their backs, rifles forged from the gutting of captured Velcoran disruptors hummed softly, hybridized with Earth's kinetic projectiles for maximum adaptability. Villar tapped his gauntlet once. The holographic map of the jungle above flickered to life across his visor, a latticework of red spheres and green arcs. The red marked Jarvek patrols, the green, kill zones. 5 minutes to breach point, whispered Captain Callum Fraser, leader of the unit, his voice cutting through the encrypted comms with surgical clarity. Villar simply nodded and shifted into a tighter formation. Above them, the Jarvek battalion stumbled deeper into the carefully manicured nightmare laid for them, oblivious to the trap tightening around their throats. Across the Gobi containment zone, concealed within the barren wastelands, teams under the command of Commander Zane Iverson executed a different phase of the operation. Iverson stood at the mouth of an ancient sun-bleached crevasse. His tactical HUD tracked the incoming Jarvek units with icy detachment. Desert winds tore at his cloak, but the thermoptic field absorbed the disturbance, rendering him an imperceptible mirage. Below the shifting sands, layers of heat-absorbing camouflage mats hid entire networks of pressure-triggered collapse points. Armored nodes, constructed decades prior, forgotten even by their creators, waited patiently for their signal. Iverson's second-in-command, Sergeant Alina Matsuda, crouched beside him, tapping out firing vectors on her wrist console. Each keystroke designated a new mining field, arming pre-synced gravity mines buried meters beneath the invaders' boots. "Target groups entering zones Echo and Foxtrot," she reported calmly. Iverson gave a slight tilt of his head. Approval. With a silent command, a web of delayed micro-explosions triggered sequentially. Entire platoons of Jarvek soldiers, towering Vrogans and sleek Silvorians, were swallowed by the earth as detonated charge lines fragmented the bedrock beneath them. The spectators across the galaxy, still linked into Jarvek's open feeds, saw only sudden, horrific vanishing acts. Bodies sinking without warning, formations dissolving into screams and static. Further west, in the skeletal remains of a deserted metropolis, another stage of the trap unfolded. Above the ruined streets, orbiting silently at geosynchronous altitude, were the Bastion drones, autonomous platforms armed with kinetic bombardment rods. Each drone hung invisible to the primitive Jarvek scans, their mass disguised by adaptive mass dispersal fields. The rods, forged from depleted uranium and sleeved with self-heating plasma cores, waited for one thing: mass triggers. Every Jarvek squad that entered the designated city grids unwittingly synchronized with the thresholds. When a critical density was reached, the drones fired. Rods fell at terminal velocity, unannounced and unstoppable. Entire city blocks were pulverized in microseconds. Concrete, steel, bone, all vaporized into glass and ash. From the deep command bunker beneath Greenland, General Severin Boom watched through secure tactical feeds, expressionless. His fingers tapped a slow, deliberate rhythm against the armrest of his command chair. The enemy was dancing exactly where they had been led. He leaned forward slightly and issued a new command. "Deploy Phase 3 assets, full infiltration." At that cue, a different type of warfare began. Operator Owen Villa's unit emerged through a concealed access hatch at the edge of a jungle clearing. They moved with seamless coordination, weapons leveled, scanners humming low. Above them, Jarvek soldiers staggered in broken formations, their communications jammed, their HUDs scrambled. Villar's left gauntlet clicked once. A swarm of nanodrones, no larger than dust motes, dispersed into the air. The drones infiltrated the aliens' gear, slipping through ventilation ports, binding to data pathways, hijacking sensory inputs. Within seconds, alien HUDs twisted into hallucinations. Enemies appeared where none existed. Friendlies were marked as hostiles. Pathways led into traps. Lieutenant Sarin, a Silvorian commander with translucent skin stretched over rigid exoskeletal ridges, slammed his gauntleted fist into his helmet in frustration. His vision warped. His targeting systems refused to lock. His squad shouted conflicting coordinates across broken comms. Desperate, Sarin pivoted to his communications array and opened a direct channel to Jarvek High Command. "This is Commander Sarin. Request immediate extraction. Sector compromised beyond..." The transmission cut out mid-sentence. On his visor, a message appeared, written in a language he didn't know, yet perfectly translated by the corrupted implants laced through his armor. "You are already out of the game." The moment of realization, of complete and utter defeat, froze him in place. A figure shimmered into existence only meters away, the adaptive cloak peeling back just enough to reveal the cold, calm face of a human operator. A heartbeat later, the figure vanished again, as if swallowed by the air itself. Sarin didn't even have time to scream before a single suppressed shot punched through his helmet, clean and absolute. Miles away, in the Gobi sector, Commander Iverson observed a similar collapse. He watched through a drone feed as the Jarvek's own data nodes spasmed under the influence of injected viruses. Targeting systems reversed. Automated defensive turrets locked onto friendly signatures. Extraction beacons, the invaders' lifelines, blinked out one by one as jammers deployed across the upper atmosphere. His mouth tightened into the ghost of a smile. "They still think they can win," Iverson muttered under his breath. Beside him, Sergeant Matsuda recalibrated her rifle, eyes cold. "They haven't realized they're not on a battlefield," she said, almost conversationally. "They're in a tomb." Iverson said nothing. He didn't have to. Above them, hidden beyond the sight of satellites and starships, Earth had shifted from defense to domination. This was no longer a war. It was a culling. And the real predators weren't the ones who came from the stars. They were the ones who had shaped Earth itself into a perfect snare. Back in orbit over Earth, aboard the Grand Jarvek flagship Dominion's Fist, the mood had soured into a tension thick enough to crack steel. Grand Marshal Vorik stood before the primary broadcast console, mandibles rigid, staring as the live transmission feeds twisted into something grotesque. Billions across the galaxy had tuned in for a spectacle of conquest. Billions now watched in stunned silence as the invincible forces of the Jarvek were reduced to scattered wreckage. Across the giant holographic screens, real-time footage captured the unfolding chaos. In the dense jungles, Jarvek troopers stumbled over each other, their shimmering armor stained with dirt and blood. The environmental traps triggered with cruel precision. Plasma bursts hidden beneath moss, gravity wells collapsing the terrain into lethal pits. Soldiers vanished mid-sprint, torn apart or simply crushed under invisible forces. One camera, mounted to the shoulder of a Vrogan heavy assault specialist, captured the moment he triggered a gravitic reversal field. A soundless pulse distorted the air. Then, in the blink of an eye, he was ripped violently upward, disappearing into the jungle canopy with a sickening crunch. His feed cut out in a static-drenched scream. In another sector, Silvorian lancers formed defensive rings along a dried riverbed, their iridescent skin glowing under the weak sun. They howled commands in their sharp, musical tongue, and one by one, they were picked off by unseen assailants. Plasma bolts stitched perfect lines through their ranks, each shot precise, almost contemptuous. The spectators gasped. Some clutched at their companions. Others leaned forward as if sheer proximity to the broadcast could explain the impossible. Across the forums of the intergalactic net, a single word began trending, rising like a storm surge: humans. At a ravaged landing site in the eastern ruins, Commander Brakar of the Rule Corps, a mountain of muscle and bone, his plated form cracked and blackened from prior engagements, stumbled into a clearing. His plasma axe was missing. His sidearm hung useless at his hip. Around him, the few survivors of his battalion limped forward, forming a desperate cluster. Brakar fell to one knee, roaring into his comms unit. "This is Commander Brakar. We surrender. I repeat, we surrender." The surrender signal, recorded live by a shoulder drone, was transmitted instantly across the Jarvek fleets and to the galactic viewership. For a heartbeat, the battlefield seemed to freeze. The humans responded, but not with gunfire. Instead, the feed showed a dense, low mist rolling into the clearing, swirling unnaturally against the laws of physics. The mist thickened, darkened, then the transmission blinked once, twice, and collapsed into blackness. Viewers saw no capture, no negotiations, only void. Inside the command chamber of the Dominion's Fist, Grand Marshal Vorik's claws screeched across the metal console as he bellowed to his communications officers. "Shut it down! Cut the broadcast! Now!" Panic spread among the bridge crew. Officers scrambled to override the feeds, to sever the link between battlefield transmitters and the galactic relay stations. But it was too late. The intergalactic data streams had already propagated. The recordings flooded forums, private channels, even blacklisted media hubs. No amount of suppression could claw them back. Billions had seen it. The mighty Jarvek coalition had been reduced to terrified animals, and the cause, The humans remained unseen, their faces and weapons hidden behind a calculated orchestration of terror. Across countless planets, in spaceports, grand palaces, merchant hubs, and underground dens, the reaction was immediate and visceral. In the crystalline towers of the Elorian technocracy, diplomats whispered hurriedly, their skin sheening with fear, about renegotiating treaties concerning human territories. In the fleshy, organic markets of the Croviath Consortium, traders deleted Earth commodities from their logs, as if mere association could draw unwanted attention. In the neon-lit broadcast domes of Nalkar Prime, the commentators tried to pivot, spinning wild theories of environmental hazards, of planetary tricks, but the feeds didn't lie. It wasn't the planet that had fought back. It was its people. Within minutes, the tone of the galactic forums shifted from scorn to dread. First came the memes, crude jokes about Jarvek incompetence, mocking images of humans as tiny, primitive creatures outwitting galaxy-spanning fleets. Then came the analysts, historians, military strategists, xenosociologists. Each offered increasingly frantic breakdowns of what the footage implied. This was not improvisation, barked military advisor Kalor Vise during a live panel. His scaled, insectile fingers drummed nervously against his console. This was planned, years, possibly decades in advance. "They knew!" shrieked another analyst, her feathers ruffled, eyes wide. "They turned their entire planet into a weapon!" Soon, the laughter died entirely. In its place, fear, thick, cloying, undeniable. Meanwhile, hidden deep within the ruins of Sector Delta, Operator Owen Villar knelt atop a crumbling skyscraper, his cloaked form blending perfectly with the shattered skyline. His rifle, humming low with residual charge, rested steady against his shoulder. Through the optic scope, he watched a trio of Rule Corps officers, heavy, armored, limping, attempt to regroup near a shattered landing beacon. They shouted into their comms, weapons waving wildly at invisible threats. Owen's finger curled against the trigger, but he didn't fire. There was no need. They were already broken. He toggled his comm, speaking in a low voice to the command net. "They still don't understand," Owen said, his tone clinical. "They think there's a way out." No one replied. No encouragement, no celebration. Only a new set of coordinates flickering into his HUD. Another engagement zone ready for the harvest. Owen stood, slipping once more into the unseeable spaces between reality and illusion. The net was tightening, and Earth's true nature was only just beginning to reveal itself. Back aboard the Dominion's Fist, Vorik stood alone now. The bridge crew dared not meet his gaze. The flagship's main view screens, once pulsing with triumph, now lay black and cold. Vorik's breathing rasped inside his helmet. His four eyes narrowed, scanning the silent consoles, the dead channels. He realized the truth far too late. This wasn't a campaign of conquest. This wasn't a war. It was an execution, and Earth had orchestrated it to perfection. Inside the fractured command chamber aboard the Dominion's Fist, Grand Marshal Vorik's voice tore through the air, thick with fury and desperation. His mandibles twitched with each syllable as he barked orders into the failing communications grid. "Activate full-spectrum reinforcement. Recall all auxiliary fleets. Prepare orbital saturation." Around him, the officers moved like broken automatons, their armor scuffed, their movements sharp with fear. Screens flickered erratically, streams of battlefield data collapsing into bursts of static. For the first time in recorded history, the Jarvek war machine trembled. From the lower decks, Sub-Commander Zhevak staggered into view, blood oozing from a gash along his feathered brow. His silver-plumed wings twitched spasmodically. "Grand Marshal," Zhevak rasped, voice strained. "Long-range beacons are silent. Reinforcements, not responding." Vorik slammed a clawed fist into the console. "Override their hesitation. Broadcast priority codes." Zhevak only shook his head once, a slow, shuddering denial. Below them, On the planet's surface, the situation spiraled further into collapse. In the tundra wastes of the Siberian containment zone, Commander Dravak snarled as he stomped across the frozen wasteland, his breath steaming in the frigid air. He clutched the jagged remains of his communications pack, now a useless, sparking wreck. "Deploy emergency extraction," he barked to his squad leaders through shortwave relays, the only channels still functioning. His orders shot through the remaining Jarvek command networks, triggering emergency protocols across multiple sectors. Extraction beacons lit up, brief, brilliant flares of hope, only to be snuffed out in the next moment by directed electromagnetic pulses. The ground itself seemed to vomit up disruption fields, rendering every tracker, every beacon, blind and inert. Dravak's secondary commander, Lieutenant Groth, stomped toward him, frost clinging to his fractured armor. "Extraction sites compromised. We're being herded, Commander." Dravak's armored tail lashed through the snow. "Rally west. Find any shelter. We hold position until command stabilizes." But command would not stabilize, because command was crumbling. In the jungle ruins, Varex, still bleeding from a deep gash across his abdomen, watched in grim silence as the last of his reconnaissance drones blinked out. His remaining soldiers, perhaps 24 from an initial force of 200, pressed into a clearing bordered by ancient moss-choked walls. "Requesting orbital extraction," Varex hissed into the comms, though he already knew the futility. The response wasn't static. It was silence. The jungle itself seemed to lean in, heavy and suffocating. A low hum rippled through the air, not from Jarvek tech, but from deep below. An old, buried pulse engine revving to life. He recognized the signature, human. And then the clearing erupted. Pressure mines hidden beneath a thin crust of moss detonated upward. Shards of compressed tungsten speared the air, cutting through the exhausted soldiers with mechanical precision. Varex threw himself flat, the blast wave passing inches above him. When he rose, half his force lay broken and still. He ripped his helmet from his head, gasping, mandibles twitching with rage and something new, fear. "This planet is cursed," one of his subordinates whimpered, voice raw. Varex turned and struck him down without hesitation. "This planet is a machine," he snarled, "and we are cogs it crushes." In the urban ruins once targeted for occupation, a new disaster unfolded. Commander Koresh, heavy with fatigue and the weight of failure, led the remnants of his Rule Corps infantry toward the ancient entrance of a subterranean city. The reinforced gates, sealed decades ago by human engineers, had been breached earlier by seismic activity. To Koresh, it looked like salvation, hard cover, defensible terrain. He didn't hesitate. The surviving battalions surged forward, plasma rifles scanning every shadowed crevice. At first it seemed deserted, vast tunnels spiraling downward into darkness, flickering emergency lights still sputtering after all these years. Signs of humanity were everywhere. Abandoned vehicles, shattered infrastructure, graffiti scrawled in dying languages. But as Koresh's scouts pushed deeper, reality set in. They weren't alone. Automated turrets, silent until now, unfolded from the ceiling. Their cold, insect-like bodies locked onto the Rule Corps mass signatures. The tunnels became killing fields. Bolts of magnetized plasma carved through the Rule Corps ranks. Barricades rigged with nanomolecular acids detonated with hissing death. Drones, human-designed but alien in their lethality, swarmed from hidden nests, latching onto exposed armor seams, drilling inward with terrifying efficiency. Koresh bellowed orders. "Regroup, hold the flanks, push deeper." But it didn't matter. The humans had seeded the ruins as a graveyard long before the Jarvek ever set foot here. Panic spread like wildfire. In sector after sector, isolated platoons broke from command structure, their leaders dead or communication severed. Veteran squads abandoned objectives, each soldier seeking any means of escape. At Extraction Point Epsilon, a group of Silvorian lancers, once famed for their elegance and precision, fought among themselves for control of a damaged drop shuttle. Plasma fire crisscrossed the sky as discipline collapsed entirely. Among the Vrogans, mutiny erupted. Entire squads turned on officers they deemed too slow or too weak. Power-armored fists cracked skulls. Disruptor blasts cooked flesh inside armor plating. In the Gobi sector, a squad of elite shock troopers, once the pride of the coalition's vanguard, turned their weapons on each other after intercepting a corrupted human broadcast, promising safe passage, a lie carefully fed into their broken networks. The arrogance that once drove them to mock the humans now consumed them from within. They had no contingency for defeat, no understanding of controlled retreat. Victory was programmed into their very bones, and without it, they fractured like brittle glass. From a hidden vantage point atop a glacial ridge, Commander Zane Iverson watched the chaos unfold through high-magnification optics. His armor, sleek and nearly indistinguishable from the icy cliffs, reflected none of the madness below. Sergeant Alina Matsuda crouched beside him, monitoring incoming telemetry on her wrist console. "They're eating themselves alive," she observed quietly. Iverson said nothing for a moment. His breath ghosted into the cold air. "They were never prepared for an enemy they couldn't see," he said finally. He adjusted his view, tracking a battered cluster of Rogan survivors staggering northward toward an old comms tower. Another trap, another stage of the dance. "Target prioritization?" Matsuda asked. Iverson flicked a control rune on his gauntlet. New coordinates populated the HUD. Containment protocol. No survivors beyond the red zones. Matsuda nodded once, already relaying the orders to the strike teams embedded throughout the sector. Across the battlefield, the humans moved unseen, tightening the net, offering no quarter. Every evacuation corridor collapsed before the Jarvek forces could reach it. Every extraction point became a tomb. The end was no longer in doubt. Now the only choice the invaders had was how long they could deny it. The valley was a natural amphitheater of death, its jagged walls curling inward like the fingers of a closing fist. In its depths, the last fragments of the once mighty Jarvek forces staggered into a makeshift formation, battered, disoriented, stripped of their dominance. Commander Varix leaned against a fractured boulder, blood seeping from gashes across his silvered Silvorian armor. His breathing was shallow, the inner systems of his exosuit flickering with intermittent power surges. Around him, survivors from different battalions gathered, Vrogans dragging wounded limbs, Rule Corps clutching scorched weapons, Silvorians gripping shattered lances. They had been herded like cattle, forced from jungle, desert, and ruin into this narrow, inescapable canyon. Above, the sheer cliffs rose steeply, offering no cover, no exit. The walls themselves bore the faint shimmer of hidden gravitic fields, barriers tuned specifically to nullify their augmentations, their strength, their flight. There was nowhere left to run. From the ridge overlooking the valley, Major Grant Sawyer crouched low behind a mound of jagged stone. His armor, matte black and textured to mimic the terrain, blended seamlessly with the surrounding rocks. Beside him, 3 other operators in full camo suits lined up, each tracking targets below through thermal and mass signatures. Sawyer spoke into the closed comms line. Containment net fully deployed, no gaps. Across multiple sectors, other units confirmed the same. The trap was absolute. Far above, tiny points of light winked into existence as containment drones broke from their high-altitude silent orbits. They descended like falling leaves, dispersing into strategic points around the perimeter. Each drone deployed flexible barrier emitters, knitting the edges of the valley into a seamless prison. The Jarvek were locked inside, stripped of every technological and biological advantage they once claimed as superiority. This wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was an execution chamber. Commander Varix wiped a blood-stained hand across his cracked visor and glanced skyward. He could feel the hum in the air, invisible walls closing around them. His tactical uplink was dead, his HUD riddled with ghost signals. His mind, trained over decades of conquest, reeled against the undeniable truth. They had lost. Beside him, Captain Dravak, battered but defiant, bared his fanged jaws in frustration. "We push north," Dravak growled, one massive claw clenching around the haft of a ruined plasma halberd. "Break through while we still have strength." Varix barely glanced at him. "And run into what? Another trap? Another minefield? Another invisible blade slicing us apart?" Dravak snarled but fell silent. Deep down, even he knew there was no escape. A low hum vibrated through the valley floor. The temperature dropped perceptibly. Fine dust floated upward, caught in unseen eddies. Then the first containment field flared to life, a shimmering arc of energy sealing the only navigable path through the northern exit. Panic rippled through the surviving troops. Shouts erupted. Weapons were raised against the invisible barriers, plasma bolts discharging wildly into the fields, only to rebound or dissipate harmlessly. They were rats in a maze built for slaughter. One of the younger Silvorians, a slender figure with cracked bioluminescent plating, stumbled toward a still-active shoulder camera lying amid the debris. The lens flickered, still connected to the Jarvek fleet's fractured network. The soldier hesitated, then bent down, wide, desperate eyes staring directly into the broadcast. His hands shook violently as he reached for the camera, his voice breaking the suffocating silence. "They knew," he whispered, voice trembling. "They knew we would come." The words, raw and haunted, transmitted across the dying channels like a death knell. In the final, flickering images, the viewers scattered across the galaxy saw the truth. Not fierce warriors ready to fight to the last breath, but cornered animals, trapped by an intelligence so cold, so calculating, that even the most engineered soldiers in the galaxy could not comprehend it. In the blackness above the planet, the human fleet began to reveal itself. Silent ships drifted out of the darkness, their hulls still shedding the last remnants of adaptive camouflage. They moved without hurry, without ceremony, positioning themselves in a wide net around the planetary hemisphere. Spearhead-class destroyers, arrowhead-shaped and bristling with invisible weaponry. Hammer-class carriers, vast behemoths braced with hangars full of drones and orbital interdiction pods. Apex-class stealth frigates, sleek, obsidian slivers that had watched this massacre unfold without ever being seen. From the bridge of the HSS Phantom, Admiral Dominic Jang watched the operation unfold on the wide tactical display. His face, weathered and lined by decades of shadow wars, remained utterly impassive. "Blockade grid activated," reported Communications Officer Mateo Kwan, standing crisp at attention. Jang gave a single nod. "Seal them in." Across the void, the human fleet deployed signal jammers, blocking all remaining transmission channels, military, civilian, emergency, with surgical precision. The last pleas for help, the last cries of the Jarvek elite, were choked into silence. No rescue would come. No message would escape. Down in the valley, Varix watched as the sky seemed to darken, not from clouds, but from shapes, human ships blotting out the stars. He dropped to his knees, the strength bleeding from his body. His claws scraped uselessly against the dusty ground. Around him, the remnants of his people sagged into the dust, weapons falling from trembling hands, armor cracked and blackened. Even Dravak, stubborn to the end, simply slumped against a boulder, his gaze empty. The humans didn't fire. They didn't need to. The silence, the inevitability, was a more potent weapon than any plasma beam or disruptor charge. Varix lifted his head once more toward the dead lens of a shattered helmet camera lying nearby. In a voice that was more broken thought than sound, he whispered the final truth. "We never fought the planet." He let the words fall into the dust. "We fought the architects hiding beneath it." He closed his eyes as the containment field around them pulsed, shrinking tighter, and the trap, sprung so long ago, finished its slow, merciless closing. The valley floor trembled under the weight of despair. In the thinning mist, the last of the Jarvek commanders gathered, their broken armor glinting under the cold, uncaring sky. Commander Varix stood at the center, barely upright, one hand pressed against a shattered rib plate. His blood, a pale silver sheen, streaked his battered exosuit. Around him, the surviving officers formed a loose, desperate circle. Captain Dravak, breathing hard through fractured mandibles. Colonel Koresh of the Rule Corps, one arm hanging limp, his thick plated skin burned and cracked, and a handful of lesser Silvorians and Vrogan shock troopers, their once proud postures now twisted by exhaustion and fear. Their extraction beacons were dead. Their comms were silent static. The sky above them, once a canvas of stars and promise, now seemed to sag under the weight of their own insignificance. Varric staggered forward, his footfalls unsteady. He reached for his personal tracker embedded deep within his chest plate. A last hope, a last lifeline. The device, coded with the highest priority override, blinked once, then died, crushed under an unseen pulse of magnetic interference. He turned slowly, scanning the perimeter. The valley walls shimmered faintly under the weight of gravitational fields, so precise that not even insects crossed them. Every escape route they had calculated, every fallback position they had prayed for, had been sealed with a surgeon's patience. There was no running, there was no fighting. There was only the end, creeping toward them in absolute silence. High above, the human fleet tightened its noose. From the bridge of the HSS Phantom, Admiral Dominic Zhang stood motionless, eyes locked on the holographic projection of the valley below. Around him, the bridge officers worked in total silence, their movements crisp, efficient. No celebration, no exclamations of victory. Only the relentless execution of a plan set into motion long before the first shot had ever been fired. Commander Callum Fraser approached from the tactical station, his face carved from stone. Perimeter established. No egress possible, Fraser reported. Zhang gave the smallest nod. Initiate the signal. Without hesitation, Fraser keyed a command into his wrist console. Across the fleet, signal jammers came online. Waves of interference poured into the atmosphere, blanketing every frequency, every wavelength, every channel the Jarvek forces might have used to scream for help. On the valley floor, the last cameras still clinging to life, strapped to helmets, shoulder mounts, or embedded into tactical gear, caught the shift. First, the hum. Then, the static. Finally, the complete, suffocating silence. In those final moments, one of the Silvorian officers, Lieutenant Siral, his slender frame trembling with fatigue, stumbled toward a still flickering transmission node embedded into the earth. The galaxy was still watching. Billions of eyes, billions of minds. Waiting for an explanation, waiting for a miracle, waiting for the inevitable. Siral's hand hovered over the node, his fingers bloody and broken. His voice cracked the dead air, thin and desperate. "We were never fighting a planet," he rasped. His voice barely rose above a whisper, but the node caught it, beamed it into the dying streams. "We were fighting a labyrinth, built by invisible predators." The feed, distorted and bleeding with static, transmitted the final image of Siral's eyes, wide, hollow, before the jammers completed their work. The transmission collapsed into blackness. No warning, no outro, no signal lost notification. Just the brutal, unspoken finality of the void. Across the galaxy, in the opulent domes of Vale Prime, the crystalline towers of Solthar Reach, the slums of Archon Drift, and the deep halls of the Council of Sorn, silence swept like a disease. The commentators, who had once screamed excitedly about the cycle of domination, stared blankly at blank screens. The gamblers, who had wagered fortunes on the speed of Earth's collapse, sat frozen with hands trembling over dead betting slates. The admirals, scholars and lords of 1,000 worlds found their tongues caught in their throats, unable to spin the disaster into anything less than what it was: annihilation. In billions of forums, feeds and private channels, a new, horrifying search term surged into existence. Earth, Terra, first in curiosity, then in fear, then in raw, primal panic. But every official database, Every entry once mocking Earth's primitive status, every archive filed under non-threat classification, was gone. Wiped. Purged. In its place, nothing. An empty white screen. A silence deeper than space itself. In the hidden depths of the HSS Phantom, deep in a sealed chamber where only the most trusted officers could tread, Admiral Zhang watched the secondary data feed, a private network showing the last seconds of the Jarvik forces in brutal clarity. He said nothing. He did not smile. Victory was not something to celebrate. Victory was simply expected. Beside him, Commander Fraser adjusted the primary field generators, ensuring the blackout remained absolute. "All signals silenced, sir," Fraser confirmed quietly. "The galaxy won't see anything more." Zhang's gaze lingered on the black screen, his eyes as cold as the void outside. "They've seen enough." He turned away, hands clasped behind his back, the folds of his uniform blending into the deep shadows of the command deck. No songs would be sung, no declarations would be made, no warnings would be issued. The galaxy would draw its own conclusions, and fear would do the rest. Far below, in the valley now lost to the void, the last Jarvik soldiers sat in stunned silence. Some wept, some clutched broken weapons, some simply stared at the ground, waiting for the end they no longer had the strength to resist. High above, the human ships remained still, silent monoliths blotting out the stars. They did not open fire. They did not descend. There was no need. Their presence alone was enough. The stage was theirs. The lights had gone out. The audience had fled or fallen silent, and in the crushing dark that followed, only one truth remained, whispered across the cold reaches of space. Humanity had been underestimated. Earth had been dismissed. The prey had built a labyrinth of death, and the hunters had walked willingly into its heart. The curtain had fallen, and what the galaxy could no longer see, it would never dare to challenge again. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. Hope you had a great time with the story. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really makes a huge difference to the channel. And hey, I've got something else for you. I've chosen another story that I think you'll really enjoy. Just click the card right here, or hit this one to jump into the full playlist. See you in the next one.